So, our first panel is about technology, which is my bread and butter. And technology and machine learning are really helping us to tackle these really difficult cataloging problems that we've been talking about in this workshop. And the tools are getting better and better and more powerful, and it really is time to start tackling those boxes and shelves of wonderful content that you've got hidden away, begging to be shared, because we can make a start now. Obviously there's still potential for conservation work needing to be done, but the thing is that digitization is becoming more affordable and accessible. And once you have that content digitally in a digitally accessible form, the magic of these tools can begin. So some of that hard lifting that you need to do with cataloging, the initial cataloging, can happen for you automatically with these tools. For this discussion panel today, we're going to be joined by Mike Bennett, who's our digital scholarship developer at the University of Edinburgh, who you met yesterday, and he has created the editor tool. And then we have Scott Renton, who's a digital library developer here with us at Edinburgh University as well, and he's been key in integrating IIIF into our systems here at the University of Edinburgh, and has been involved with the wider IIIF community from the very beginning. He also looks after our image management system, Luna, that holds the digitized images of the session papers that we've used in this tool. We have Lauren Moulds, who you also met yesterday, and he directed the technical end of the Scottish Session Papers project at the UVA Law Library, and has liaised closely with Mike and Scott to get the digitized pages from their copies of the session papers into Luna and using our digital scholarship tools. We're also very happy to have Susan Pettigrew with us, who is our photographer and was instrumental in getting this content into Luna, and will be able to answer any of your digitization questions. How long have I been on mute? Like I said yesterday, we're going to moderate the discussion. Like we did yesterday, we're going to moderate the discussion. So we're looking in the chat box for any questions that you may have. So to start off the conversation, I'm going to ask Scott, can you talk us through why we chose to use IIIF at the University of Edinburgh?
Sure thing. First of all, I should probably check. Do people know what IIIF is? It's one of these sort of slightly murky things that we know it's powering a lot of the things we're doing, but in what way? Um, I think it's a slightly difficult thing to explain. It's the International Image Interoperability Framework, but it's not a programming language. It's not programming framework. It's nothing like that. It's a framework of standards which have been developed to produce uniform, rich access to media wherever it's hosted. You can tell them, and a vibrant community is sprung up around it. And basically building on the principles which the initial community came up with. So it's used its standards and its technical aspects to come up with APIs, allowing us to transfer and host content, and it's a lot of software has sprung up around it as well. Viewers which can interpret IIIF compliant documents, and servers which can serve them up. So that's very fast, obviously. We can talk more about that. In Edinburgh, we've been using Luna since about 2005. I think predates myself and Ianthe being here. I think Norman may have been here when it was procured. Uh, but the time it was very much used for just as a kind of image viewer for project work, and it was only sort of maybe in the last sort of 8 or 9 years that we actually sort of got a BAU process of being able to push through all our digitization and getting it to appear online, which Susan has been massively instrumental in. However, I think we realised up to probably about 2015, I think, was the first time that any of us went, sort of attended a IIIF related event and realised just the power of what it could do for us in terms of making our lives easier. I think the benefits of sort of getting your content opened up really is is massive, but also this whole idea of being able to access content through URLs, so you're not having to pull one set of media to another place and transfer it, being able to access other people's content, and that this whole idea of publish once and reuse often, I think is something which IIIF has made available for us. The system flexibility has been great, and we've found there have been lots and lots of ways that we've been able to integrate IIIF content into our existing systems, and I think that's probably where I've come in more. I mean, I think Mike's work has been building on it and using things that IIIF can do to build new things. I've largely been almost reverse engineering and seeing where we are hosting images and seeing if we can make use of the fact that we use a tool in Luna which is entirely IIIF compliant, and we played a big part in that. I think we had a lot of good conversations with got a very strong relationship with Luna Imaging, and we were able to sort of direct them a little bit towards can you make it do this, can you make it do this, so that we could help sort of mold the tool to make it do the things that we wanted it to do as well. So I'd be very happy to show some more examples of places that we've used it, but that's kind of the story. I think we probably about 2015, I think we really engaged with IIIF, and by 2017 I would say we had IIIF kind of running and through a lot of systems in the university.
That's great, Scott. Does anyone have any questions about IIIF that you'd like to ask in the chat?
I'll step in and say that we've at UVA and at the Law Library specifically, we've really adopted IIIF as our image delivery platform, and mostly because of probably within the last 3 years, it's been a little bit shorter than how long Edinburgh's been using it, but our main libraries have switched to it, and we're in the process of moving legacy content into IIIF with the model that we built for the SCOS project. It's sort of the one we built to integrate in with our other sites and our other repositories. What's fantastic about with IIIF is we have a baseline set of metadata that we send along with the images to Luna that corresponds to the shared repository, which is all the collections of the session papers from various institutions. But for us as well, we have a host of metadata that doesn't correspond to that shared collection. So we've created more rich metadata that corresponds to our needs from our collections, as well as things that maybe don't fit in with the shared project. So we can, on our end, edit the manifests, which are what generates the lists of images on canvases, on the canvas and annotations, that when we host it on our site, it looks very, very different in the website as well as the manifest. But those images and the data that we have about it are also in Luna, so the shared repository can have that presented completely differently, which adds a lot of flexibility to how the images are displayed and how they're shared, which is fantastic.
So Mike, the tool that you showed us yesterday, which was the precursor to the editor tool, was your WIF. I love your acronyms. WIF tool. Can you explain how that's using IIIF?
Yeah, so WIF, which stands for Word Highlighting in IIIF, and yes, I do like a good acronym, I have to say, is the way it works is that IIIF has the concept of annotating all the resources that appear inside it. So you can apply annotations to any part of the resource. So frequently you would have annotations with metadata saying this is the title, etc., but you can annotate anything. So if you have, for example, images of paintings, you could have annotations that say who all the people in the painting are. It's just a way of providing like rich context metadata about the content of the material or commentary. It's also used for transcription. So if you have a photograph of a book, a page of text, you apply a IIIF annotation which says this is the transcription that belongs with this image. So the way the tool works is it generates those on the fly in response to search queries. So when you come in and you say, I want to search for kelp, then it goes and it finds all of the references to kelp, and it returns you a IIIF annotation list, which says, here are the resources, which is a list of the pages, and here are the place in those resources where this annotation appears. So it essentially allows any IIIF native viewer or client to then present that however they want. There's no prescriptivism about how the annotation has to be presented. So in the demo I saw you yesterday, we're doing it to just draw a highlight around the box. So a lot of IIIF viewers support that as the default way that the search API works. So when you make a search, it just returns you an annotation list. Just because it's a search that's dynamically generated, but you can also have a static annotation list. If you have the same resources appearing, you want to serve the same annotations to everybody. It's not dependent on a contextual search. But there's no prescriptivism about how that's presented. It's just here is the parts of the object with the annotation.
That's great. It's great that it gives you the ability to do that. Okay, so like I said, a precursor to being able to use all these tools is digitizing the material in the first place. And we're very happy to have Susan with us. And digitizing the Scottish session papers was a mammoth pilot project that Susan was involved with. And I thought it would be interesting to hear from Susan what you think the key takeaways from that pilot project were.
Yeah, sure. So just to give a little bit of context, I'm pretty sure you might have all seen some photos of the original volumes yesterday. So they were pretty challenging originals for photography. But we're a fairly small digitization unit. At the time, we were a team of about 3 or 4. And we really only dealt with sort of readers' orders, on-demand digitization of a few pages here and there. So this was a completely different scale. There had been a mass digitization unit in a different building, what we call the University Collections Facility. But that project for thesis digitization had completed, and when that finished, the group largely disbanded. So we only had a couple of members from their team come to us to help with the digitization of the session papers. So I think the key takeaways for us would be that it's an entirely different thing when you're working at scale. So we learned quite a lot through this project, and largely things around workflow and IT infrastructure. So at the time, we didn't even have any workflow software to be dealing with this, which ended up meaning that we had quite a backlog in the processing and QA. And we were just vastly outstripped by the speed that the scanning staff were going compared to the process and QA stages. And so as a result of that, we have invested in workflow software, which we implemented just this last summer, and taken that on to use in the Lyle digitization. First few volumes of the notebooks that we've done. And that's proving really useful and a far better way to push images through a system. The other things that we've sort of identified have been around the PCs. Some of them were just sort of standard university issue for office and students, and that just simply wasn't what we needed for this sort of processing of large, high quality RGB files. We were digitizing at 600 dpi so that you could zoom in to make the annotations easier to read. And so, those sorts of file sizes just simply wouldn't cut it with the PC equipment that we had. And we also had an issue around data upload out at the University Collections Facility. The infrastructure there was not quite as good as we have in the main library. And I think that was causing some log jams for us as well. So both on the PC and the networking issues. We're sort of working towards resolving that for our next project that will be run out at the UCF.
Yeah, excellent. Wow. We're very grateful to have you, Susan. And none of this would be here without the digitized images to work from. So there you go.
Yeah.
Right. So Rachel's asked a big question in the chat. She said that she's wondering about the challenges of working with different professional languages, from technical development standards to archival standards, library and other standards, and the challenges that come with navigating through these with colleagues from other disciplines.
So I'm happy to jump in at the start here. It can be really challenging. There is no doubt about that. Sometimes it's difficult because different fields use different terminology to talk about the same concepts.
Yeah.
And that language barrier can sometimes be hard to cross, especially also if there are terms that mean one thing in development, which mean a different thing when you apply them to an archival thing. So when we talk about having the golden copy of the data from a development perspective, what we mean is this is the database that has the authority, but it might change. You can edit it, you can bring new data in, that data is mutable. Whereas from an archival perspective, you might say, no, the golden copy is, this is it, this is the master copy, it doesn't ever change, everything else we do derives from this. But so stuff like that, there can occasionally be like barriers in terms of team work, but it's not something that I think causes a huge issue, because we sit down and talk about things, you can find analogies, you can learn the terminologies from other domains. In terms of incorporating that into the technical workflow, it becomes a slightly different challenge, because then it's about preserving the original intent when the language used to represent it might change. So for example, if people are familiar with Dublin core metadata, this is a reasonably limited set, but you can extend it. So when you have something like dc.contributor, that's a fairly broad field that can apply to a lot of people. So often, if you look at the records, for example, for a thesis, you might find the supervisor listed under dc.contributor. And maybe it's under dc.contributor.supervisor if the people producing the DC have that extension. So the challenge then is about preserving the kind of domain specialist way of referring to things and the metadata fields as they travel through all of the systems. And this is, I think a problem that lots of people are still working on solving.
Yeah.
It's very difficult when you have to have data represented in multiple places using different systems to make sure that the way it's interpreted and parsed by somebody consuming that data respects the original intent of the person creating the data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too that we can't really afford to do this project at scale and to implement all of the technologies that we would have needed to have this be successful by ourselves. So one of the things that's really key is getting buy-in from a variety of different parties. One of those are people who provide money. The other one is administrators. And the other one is colleagues who don't think it's worthwhile in your own institution or other ones. And so I think a good opportunity that the dialogue between different areas of expertise provides you with opportunities to figure out how to explain things in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So like one of the things that we're at pains to do with our project at UVA is, of course, to convince people of the historical value of these session papers, which we've done, I think, to some extent pretty successfully. On the other hand, when we try to write grants for how to implement this technology, to make it extensible, to make it open source, to make it readily available, we have to be able to explain what we're doing in a way that is sort of universally understandable for a lot of different audiences. And so it challenges us as a community or a team of archivists and technologists and subject experts is to say, okay, well, how can we explain this to our boss who doesn't get this? Or how do we go to this admin and say, this really is worthwhile and we do need this person working on this project? And so they don't often care about the acronyms as much as the output and the cost. And so a lot of us is starting to say, what technologies do we need as technologists? But also, what do we need as a team to make these successful? I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but I do think it provides opportunities for us to engage with people in admin, but also in smaller institutions that might be partners in further collective efforts, or to help streamline the tool or make it applicable to different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we really want to get the content out there, and that's what this is all about. And for me, it's been quite challenging in my head to find the balance between something having all the metadata that it should have in an ideal scenario without the resource to catalog it, versus the metadata that you would get from an automated tool, and how you find the balance between what's enough. Because surely, having some metadata extracted that would allow you to search for the resource is better than not having any, because then you wouldn't find the resource at all. But then you also want to meet the archival standards and have all the information that you need. And it's about finding that balance. So these tools are giving us the kickstart because they're helping us make a start. But then we still need to check at the end of the day that the content that we're putting out there is correct, like the editor tool allows you to do, to correct mistakes that were made, etc. And it's lessening the resource, but you still need the resource. And you need to be able to make those arguments like you're saying, Lauren.
I think also on this thing, one of the important things to understand is that because of the scale of some of the data sets, you have to be prepared to make a compromise on the data. It's a big shift from like the very traditional way of dealing with university and institutional collections, where this must not be seen by anybody until it is correct. But when you're dealing with transcribing and putting entity information into 6 million pages,
it's mind-blowing.
If you wait for that to be correct, no one will ever see it or use it, and the whole project will be a waste of time for everybody involved. So a big part of it is being able to say, we are going to publish this data and these resources with this data attached, and we will make it clear this was generated by a machine learning tool or by such and such. As the data may not be perfect, but it's a starting point, right? This is exactly what you were just saying. It allows you to find the things quickly, even if maybe there are still mistakes, and that's okay. It's like iterate and improve, right? You can publish one set of the data. With the edited data, the first pass of the model does not pick up people's affiliations. It doesn't understand how to extract the judges because we don't have that level of training data. So the first set of data we publish will just have everyone listed as person. But once we have the training data, we then rerun the model over the data, and we get a better set of data, which we can then publish. Later we can update what's there, and we say, okay, this metadata is the best we have now, but it will improve in the future.
I'm bringing it back to
get it out there, because if it's not out there, no one is using it, nothing happens. We'll sit here going, hooray, we've transcribed 6 million pages.
But can I say one quick thing about that though, Mike? And it gets back to what we were all sort of collectively stressing yesterday, is that we can develop computational tools, we can do computer assisted technologies that help process 6 million documents. But to make those valuable, we have to have subject expertise, and we have to have curatorial expertise to make that tool translate to the research and to contextualizing that collection. So it's wonderful when we can build tools that help us find the stuff that we need, bespoke searches and that sort of thing, but it has to be placed within a context, a curatorial context that helps us understand the metadata, and that the metadata makes sense for these specific documents and the shared documents as well. That's key. that's absolutely key, and it's all part of what we do as part of our profession as archivists and librarians. But now we just have a new tools that make it really cool to do large corpora.
Mm-hmm. And it's a kickstart, yeah. And I've got in the back of my mind, we've got a big push for digital preservation at the University of Edinburgh, as do a lot of places, and there's quite strict standards for digital preservation about when something should be digitally preserved. And it's how do you get this massive corpus up to a state that you would be able to do that? At what point do you go, okay, we're happy with this now that we're going to push it through to digital preservation? Because you wouldn't want to lose the work that you've done so far, but you also want to meet the standards that you need to meet. So it's all this big balancing act. But I completely agree. At least it's giving us a starting point, and it's letting us find this content and make it discoverable in a way that it hasn't been before, without having a cataloguer sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours extracting the data. Okay, so
you also don't want to have to dig your item back out of digital preservation to change it.
No. You might have an interim version, and then a few years later, once you've actually had the resource to catalogue it thoroughly, put another version in, but still, oof. So Randy's asked a good question. So Scott, what is the technical expertise required to install and use IIIF? Is this a tool that could be used by smaller institutions without large IT departments?
That is something of the barrier, isn't it? In some ways, we were very, very lucky that we happened to have a DAMS that was already IIIF compliant, so or became IIIF compliant. So we never actually had to implement anything ourselves to make our images that were already in situ become IIIF. We did later on experiment and do run a subsequent open source IIIF server called Cantaloupe, which is pretty easy to get up and running. You don't need a big team to do that. You just need a server to put the stuff on, and then you're pretty much away. But I think increasingly it's something that we the IIIF community themselves don't want it to be a barrier to smaller institutions to be able to to get up and running. So they are. I think continually we're seeing more and more guidance and advice as to how to get going. But essentially, if you've got something that can serve up your content and you have the content, then you're most of the way there, because then other people with viewers can look at your stuff by using your URLs. So we're quite privileged here in that we've got a few people that can work on these things. So we haven't actually had to come up against the problem of how to do this as a one-man band. But I know that these things are improving, and I think if you go to the IIIF website at iiif.io, there's lots of information there about how to get started.
Yes.
Put something in the chat.
Another question about teams here from Janet, saying, for an institution starting out to make these sorts of digital objects available, what do you think are the basic technical system building blocks? That is, the types of software you need and how you can join them together. What sort of technical team do you need to build and support this infrastructure?
Well, you certainly need some form of an image management system or some sort of that's able to store and tie it up with metadata, basically, which you're able to push out. And we've coded a lot around our IIIF things. I mean, certainly the editor tool couldn't have been possible without writing a lot of code around the manifests that are generated automatically by the DAMs. So there is it depends how far you want to take it, really.
Yeah.
But it's because it's a completely standardized thing. Everything works with JSON. It's reading and writing with that is with a bit of technical savvy is fairly easy to do. I don't know if Nate wants to jump in here with.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in really quickly and say there are a lot of people also now who are working on making tools built on top of IIIF for people who are new or not technical. So there is a chap, David, I've forgotten his name, but I will dig it out and dig out the link to his work later, who is working on a tool which allows you to generate and serve IIIF manifests and all these things just from publishing your image files and publishing some basic data on a GitHub repository, and then you just say, here are the images, here is the metadata associated with them, the title, and it will use GitHub to serve a very minimal IIIF implementation at level 0, but will allow you to kind of take part in that ecosystem. There are lots of tools out there for people who are getting started. There are some good guides. The IIIF community runs regularly, I think once every 3 months, maybe once every 6 months, an introduction to IIIF course. You can find all that on the IIIF.io website. So the technical barriers are not great to get started.
I mean, I think the other thing too, I'd say to Janet though is, and I'm not certain if she's asking specifically about IIIF, but maybe more sort of like creating a digital collection that's available online. So yeah, I think IIIF in terms of image servers, is serving out images is the gold standard. But I do think that there exists relatively affordable and in fact pretty cheap now these days versus what it was 10 years ago. We're a Drupal shop at UVA. We use Drupal for almost all of our sort of complex database-driven projects. But there are other CMSs, content management systems that can readily be adapted to digital management, digital asset management, and complex metadata schemes and front-end presentations and exhibitions. We use Drupal. Omeka is a great tool, which is actually from not UVA specifically, but from Virginia. Just throw that out there. And there are other tools that you can get going with relatively easy setup, a relatively straightforward process, and that can leverage our skills in creating and describe metadata schemes and describing documents and understanding how they relate to each other. And all you do is upload images and they're online, and they may not be in IIIF initially, but then creating one of these collections can be online from digital images with metadata available online, can be done, and there's guides all over the place. It can be done.
Yeah, and it's all open source, isn't it, Lauren? You don't have to.
At least, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, there are content DM is pretty expensive and it does that sort of thing. And there are other tools that you can pay a premium to a vendor to get these things out of the box. But yeah, I think many of us here, if not all of us here in this panel, are going to be open source advocates. And there are tools that can leverage open source platforms to do the things that we want as digital archivists.
Yeah.
I think that's one of our slight hang our heads in shame a wee bit is that we try to promote open source everywhere, but we have currently a vendor supplied DAMs, and it's something that we've spoken to the guys in the IIIF community about, and what's their take on it? Do they think it's a bad thing? And they don't feel it's a bad thing at all, because the more people that they've got engaged, and certainly vendor supplied systems are a big part of that, the more the message of IIIF gets out there, so it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Right, Mike, here's one for you. Can you expand on the metadata fields that are required by your IIIF tool? Is there any extra fields that have to be inputted at the digitization stage?
So no, is the answer. Because it's all optional. So the IIIF tool just takes in a IIIF manifest and turns it into an OCR document, and then does the pipeline on it. So at that stage, you don't need to supply any extra information, any extra metadata, because the way it works with IIIF is it's like a Lego bricks kind of system. You can generate all this data, put it into the tool, and then when you're ready to expose it alongside your kind of IIIF presentation, you add a line to your IIIF manifest that just says, hey, there is an annotation list available at this URL, or there is a search service available at this URL. And that can be done at any point. So, for example, Lauren can probably tell you, they had IIIF manifests online on the SCOS website for a while before my search service existed. So they were there and already being presented, and only when the search service was developed and implemented, then Lauren went back and added the line to the manifest that said, hey, there's a search service for these available at this URL, turn it on. So it's modular. You don't have to have everything in place all at once before you can start doing anything. You can add data and other services and other functionality as you get the material required to support that.
Got a question from Fergus here. It says, can you talk a little about how the feedback loop from end users to developers works in practice? I'm thinking in terms of feature requests, bug reports and the like. Just a vague outline of the process would be useful.
So in terms for the editor tool, because it's something that was sort of sole developer, it was just me working on it, and I was working quite closely with all of the sort of rest of the editor team. It was a pretty quick and painless process. It was, you know, I wrote some code, I put a version of the website up, I said, go and use it, email me if you have any problems. And then we had a Trello board, which Evie was using. So when she found problems with the site, or when she wanted new roles added, so for example, the writer to the signet or the Lord Advocate's roles, which you saw in the demonstration yesterday, she just opened a ticket on the Trello board for me to say, hey, could you add this role? I looked at it every couple of days, went and updated the database necessarily, and that was that done. So on a larger project, it's maybe not that smooth and easy, but at least for us, you know, with a small development team, it was quite nice to just, you know, talk to each other, basically.
Okay. Oh, Evie says the Trello board worked well for her too. Great. Does adding a line to the metadata supplied by IIIF actually link to the annotation or just refer you to it?
So the IIIF manifests contain the metadata about the manifest inside them, which might be, for example, the shelf mark of the object, maybe some physical metadata, you know, the size of the object, some information about its provenance. In terms of adding the annotations that we create with the editor tool, they go in as a reference to a separate file. So inside the manifest, you'll have a kind of block of JSON which says extra annotations for this object exist at this URL XYZ, and your IIIF client will go ahead and download those for you as part of the viewing experience.
And what I think is really powerful about IIIF in terms of a front end for presentation is you can customize not simply the viewer on your site, but also the manifest that you're piping out. So you can say, we just want to show a very large centered image snippet of something, and that's all that it would show. As opposed to you want to have all the complex metadata about this complete document. You can seriously create a manifest that's a series of objects that are not necessarily related in the collection. And you can have customized annotations for those. And so it helps with exhibition of documents in a very sort of sophisticated way, because it's modular, it's extensible, and it's not dependent on all that data being always static. So you can, understanding how IIIF works, you can have this image comes in here with this section highlighted, and it zooms over to here, and then you can have a next one appear next to it. That's obviously quite complicated, but it goes to the power of it as a tool, because it allows you a great deal of flexibility in presenting images and annotations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's us at time. That was a really quick 45 minutes. So thank you very much to our panelists. I'm not sure where Susan's disappeared to. She's at the top in a tiny little box. But thank you very much for your input. We've got a 15-minute break now, and then we'll be on to our next panelist session, which is talking about teaching and research with the session papers.
Thanks, everyone. Just to chip in really quickly, if you have more questions that we didn't have time to get to, please put them in the Slack channel. We'll be kicking around. We're very happy to talk about all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.